Have you ever been surrounded by people who claim to love you, yet somehow you always end up feeling smaller after spending time with them? I spent years convincing myself that I was being too sensitive, that their jokes were harmless, that this was just how friends showed affection. But deep inside, in that quiet space where truth lives before we silence it with excuses, I knew something was terribly wrong. I knew that every time I left their company, I felt diminished, exhausted, like I had spent hours defending myself in a war I never signed up to fight. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I finally stopped showing up to my own execution. This is about the day I decided that my peace was worth more than their entertainment, and how one simple decision to start declining invitations without explanation changed absolutely everything about my life. It started so gradually that I didn't even notice it happening. You know how sometimes the most dangerous things are the ones that creep up on you slowly, like gaining weight one cookie at a time, or losing yourself one compromise at a time? That was my friendship with this group. We had known each other since college, back when we were all figuring out who we wanted to be in the world. Jessica was the leader, the one with the biggest personality and the sharpest tongue. Then there was Marcus, her boyfriend, who would laugh at anything she said like it was gospel. Amanda was the quiet one who never intervened, and Tyler was the guy who thought being brutally honest was a personality trait. For years, I was just Sarah, the one who took it all with a smile. The jokes started innocently enough. Comments about my fashion choices, light teasing about my career path, playful jabs about my dating life or lack thereof. At first, I laughed along because that's what you do with friends, right? You take the hit, you laugh it off, you prove you're cool and can handle it. But over time, the jokes became more pointed, more personal, more frequent. They stopped being about harmless quirks and started targeting my insecurities with sniper precision. My weight became a running gag. My ambitions were treated as adorable fantasies. My opinions were dismissed before I even finished expressing them. And somehow I had become the designated punching bag of the group, the one everyone could unite in mocking, the comic relief whose feelings didn't really matter because, hey, it's all just jokes, right? I remember one evening at Jessica's apartment. We were all sitting around drinking wine and catching up. I had just started a new job that I was genuinely excited about, working in marketing for a nonprofit organization that focused on environmental conservation. I was passionate about it. Felt like I was finally doing something meaningful with my life. When I brought it up, barely able to contain my enthusiasm, Jessica interrupted me mid-sentence with that laugh of hers, that particular laugh that always made my stomach drop. She said, and I remember her exact words because they're burned into my memory, she said, "Oh, sweetie, a nonprofit? So basically you're getting paid in good feelings and poverty wages? When are you going to get a real job like the rest of us?" The table erupted in laughter. Marcus nearly spit out his wine. Amanda smiled uncomfortably but said nothing. Tyler added, "At least you'll have plenty of time to work on your body since you won't be able to afford to eat out." More laughter. I smiled, took a sip of my wine, and felt something crack inside my chest. That night, I drove home with tears streaming down my face, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I kept trying to convince myself that they didn't mean any harm, that I was overreacting, that this was just friendly banter. But my body knew the truth even when my mind was still making excuses. My heart was racing. My throat was tight. My eyes burned with unshed tears that I had been holding back for what felt like years. When I got home, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back at me. Where had I gone? When had I become so small, so willing to shrink myself, so desperate to maintain friendships that were slowly killing my spirit? I had always prided myself on being strong, on being resilient, on being the person who could weather any storm. But what I was doing wasn't strength. It was survival. I was surviving my own friendships, and that realization hit me like a freight train. The breaking point came on my 32nd birthday. I had been dreading it for weeks because I knew there would be a gathering, and I knew what that meant. It meant being the center of attention in the worst possible way, being roasted under the guise of celebration, smiling through barbs that would be delivered with cake and candles. But I had hoped, with that desperate kind of hope that makes you feel pathetic even as you cling to it, that maybe this time would be different. Maybe on my birthday they would show me the kindness and respect that I had always shown them. Maybe for one day, I could just be celebrated without being diminished. I should have known better. We met at a trendy restaurant downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs and overpriced cocktails with names like Lavender Dreams and Midnight in Paris. Everyone was already there when I arrived, which should have been my first warning sign. They had ordered appetizers without me, were already deep in conversation. barely looked up when I slid into the booth except to offer obligatory happy birthdays that felt more like formalities than genuine sentiments. Jessica was holding court as usual, telling some story about her recent promotion that everyone was hanging on to, like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. I sat there feeling like a guest at my own birthday dinner, like I was intruding on their evening rather than being the reason for it. When the food came, the comments started. Tyler made a joke about how much I was eating, something about making up for all those poverty nonprofit meals. Marcus commented on my dress, asking if I had bought it at a thrift store with a tone that made it clear he found that hilarious. Jessica, ever the ringleader, started telling embarrassing stories from our college days, stories I had asked her multiple times never to share, stories that painted me as desperate and pathetic and ridiculous. The table laughed and laughed and laughed, and I sat there with a smile frozen on my face, feeling my soul slowly detach from my body as a defense mechanism. Have you ever felt that? That sensation of watching yourself from somewhere outside yourself, like you're floating above the scene, observing your own humiliation with a strange, detached curiosity? Then came the cake. They had ordered a custom cake, and when they brought it out, I saw what they thought was hilarious. Instead of a normal birthday message, the cake said, "Happy birthday to our favorite hot mess." The table erupted in laughter. Someone was recording on their phone. Jessica was beaming, clearly proud of this creative cruelty. And something inside me that had been bending and bending for years finally snapped. Not dramatically, not with an outburst or tears or a scene. It snapped quietly, definitively, like a rope that has been fraying and finally gives way. I looked at that cake, at their laughing faces, at the phone recording my humiliation for posterity, and I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. This was not love. This was not friendship. This was a toxic dynamic where my pain was their entertainment, and I had been complicit in it by continuing to show up. I made it through the rest of the dinner on autopilot. I thanked them for coming. I blew out the candles. I smiled for the photos that would undoubtedly be posted on social media with captions about what a good sport I am. But inside, I was already gone. Inside, I had already made a decision that would change everything. I was done. Done performing, done shrinking, done accepting crumbs of respect and calling it friendship. Done pretending that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable or something I deserved. I was done. And the relief of that decision was so overwhelming that I almost started crying right there at the table, except these would have been tears of liberation, not pain. The next day, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I didn't wake up angry or bitter or vengeful. I woke up clear. Clear about what I needed to do, clear about why I needed to do it, clear about the fact that I owed no one an explanation for choosing myself. I looked at my phone and saw the group chat already buzzing with messages, inside jokes about the night before, memes making fun of the cake. Someone had even created a GIF from the video of me blowing out the candles with the caption, "Trying to wish away my problems." A month ago, I would have laughed along, would have been a good sport, would have participated in my own mockery. But that person was gone now, replaced by someone who finally understood that self-respect isn't selfish. It's survival. Over the next few weeks, I started receiving invitations like clockwork. Weekend brunch, happy hour, someone's apartment for game night, a concert, a dinner party, all the usual gatherings where I would show up and play my assigned role. But this time, I did something I had never done before. I declined. Not with long explanations or excuses about being busy or having other plans. Just simple, polite declinations. "Thanks for the invite, but I won't be able to make it." That's it. No elaboration, no justification, no door left open for negotiation. Just a clear, firm boundary delivered with the same casualness they had delivered years of insults. The first time I did it, my hands were shaking as I typed the message. My thumb hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What if they get upset? What if they demand an explanation? What if they think I'm being dramatic? What if they cut me out completely and I end up alone? But then another thought cut through all the noise. A thought that was quiet but powerful. What if staying costs more than leaving? What if my peace is worth the risk? I hit send, put my phone face down on my desk, and took the deepest breath I had taken in years. It felt like oxygen was finally reaching parts of me that had been suffocating. It felt like freedom. The responses came quickly, confusion wrapped in entitlement. "Wait, why not? Are you okay? Did something happen? You're never too busy for us, LOL." I didn't respond. I let the questions sit there unanswered because I owed them nothing. Not an explanation, not my time, not my presence, not my emotional labor of making them understand why their treatment of me was unacceptable. The beautiful thing about boundaries is that they don't require the other person's understanding or approval to be valid. They just are. You set them, you maintain them, and you protect them like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does. I declined the second invitation with the same simple message, and the third, and the fourth. Each time it got a little easier, like a muscle I was strengthening with use. The panic that had accompanied that first declination began to fade, replaced by something I hadn't felt in their presence in years. Calm. My weekends became mine again. My time became mine again. My energy became mine again. I started doing things I had neglected, things that brought me joy instead of anxiety. I took a pottery class. I started hiking on Saturday mornings, watching the sunrise from different trails around the city. I read books without interruption, cooked elaborate meals just for myself, spent hours in museums letting art speak to me without having to perform or explain or defend my experience. But of course, my absence didn't go unnoticed for long. The messages in the group chat became more pointed. Jessica sent a private message asking if I was mad about something, her tone carrying that familiar mix of concern and irritation, like my feelings were an inconvenience to her social plans. I responded simply, "Not mad, just busy with life." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. I was busy rebuilding a life that I had let them demolish piece by piece. Busy remembering who I was before I learned to make myself smaller. Busy discovering that solitude felt infinitely better than belonging to a group that required me to betray myself to be accepted. Tyler sent a message to the group saying he missed me and asking when I was going to stop being a hermit. Amanda sent a private message that was softer, saying she hoped I was okay and that she had noticed I seemed distant lately. I appreciated her reaching out, but I also recognized that her silence during all those moments when I needed someone to speak up made her complicit. Silence in the face of cruelty is not neutrality. It's choosing the side of the oppressor. Marcus sent a meme about flaky friends, which I'm sure was directed at me. I looked at it, felt absolutely nothing, and went back to reading my book. Their opinions of me, their judgments, their attempts to guilt me back into the fold, none of it had the power it once did. I had taken that power back and reclaimed it for myself. The guilt tried to creep in during quiet moments. That voice that had been trained over years to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own well-being would whisper that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should give them another chance. Maybe I was throwing away years of friendship over a few jokes. But then I would remember. I would remember the birthday cake. I would remember every time I had driven home crying. I would remember the knot in my stomach I would get every time I saw their names on my phone. I would remember how exhausted I always felt after being with them, like I had run a marathon of emotional defense. Real friendship doesn't exhaust you. Real friendship doesn't require you to constantly defend your worth. Real friendship doesn't turn your vulnerabilities into punchlines. Have you ever experienced the profound silence that comes after removing toxic people from your life? It's not an empty silence. It's a full one, rich with possibility, humming with peace. In that silence, I began to hear myself again. My own thoughts, my own desires, my own voice that had been drowned out by years of trying to be acceptable to people who were never going to accept me anyway. I realized that I had been performing for so long that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to just exist without an audience judging my every move. I started journaling, pouring out years of suppressed feelings onto pages that wouldn't mock me or minimize my pain. I wrote about the girl I used to be before I met them, confident and full of dreams, unapologetic about taking up space. I wrote about who I wanted to become, someone who chose peace over popularity, someone who understood that being alone is infinitely better than being with people who make you feel lonely. Weeks turned into months, and the invitations became less frequent. The group chat that used to blow up my phone multiple times a day became quieter. I wasn't removed from it, but I wasn't really part of it anymore either, existing in that liminal space of technical membership without actual belonging. And it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like shedding skin that no longer fit, like taking off shoes that had been pinching my feet for miles, like finally setting down a heavy bag I had been carrying for so long that I forgot I was allowed to put it down. During this time of intentional solitude, something unexpected happened. I started attracting different people into my life, not aggressively seeking new friendships, not desperately trying to fill the void, but just existing as my authentic self and noticing who was drawn to that authenticity. I met Rachel at the pottery class, a woman about my age who worked as a teacher and had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. We started grabbing coffee after class, and I was amazed at how different our conversations felt. She asked about my nonprofit work with genuine interest, wanted to know the details, celebrated my passion instead of mocking it. When I shared my thoughts or opinions, she listened without interrupting or dismissing. When I made mistakes with my pottery, she laughed with me, not at me, and there's a world of difference between those two things. I reconnected with an old friend from high school, Emma, who I had lost touch with over the years. We met for lunch one Saturday, and within minutes it felt like no time had passed at all. I told her, carefully and without naming names, about what I had been going through with my friend group. Instead of telling me I was overreacting or that I should give them another chance, she looked at me with this expression of recognition and said, "I'm so proud of you for choosing yourself." Those words hit me harder than any insult ever had. When was the last time someone was proud of me for setting a boundary? When was the last time my self-preservation was celebrated instead of criticized? I nearly cried right there in the restaurant, overcome by the simple gift of being seen and validated. Through Emma, I met a whole circle of people who approached friendship differently. People who showed up when they said they would. People who apologized when they hurt you instead of telling you that you were too sensitive. People who celebrated your wins without needing to diminish them. People who could give and receive honest feedback without turning it into a weapon. People who understood that true intimacy isn't about knowing all of someone's weaknesses so you can exploit them for a laugh. It's about knowing all of someone's weaknesses and protecting them fiercely. This was what I had been missing. This was what friendship was supposed to feel like. And the contrast to my old group was so stark that it made me angry at myself for settling for so long. Then came the moment I had been both dreading and anticipating. It was a random Thursday evening when Jessica called me, not texted, actually called, which she rarely did. I stared at my phone ringing, my heart doing that old familiar jump of anxiety, and I had to remind myself that I didn't owe her my immediate availability. I let it go to voicemail, finished making my dinner, ate slowly and mindfully, then listened to the message she left. Her voice sounded different, less commanding, almost uncertain. "Hey Sarah, it's been a while since we've really talked. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. We miss you. I miss you. Can you call me back when you get a chance?" I didn't call back that night. I needed time to process, to decide what I wanted to do, to check in with myself about what interaction with her felt like in my body. Did my stomach clench with anxiety? Did I feel that old familiar dread? Or did I feel neutral, protected by the boundaries I had built? It took me 3 days to call her back, and when I did, I was calm and clear about my intentions. I wasn't calling to rebuild what we had. I was calling to see if there was anything worth salvaging at all. The conversation was awkward and careful, two people dancing around a truth that needed to be spoken. She asked why I had been so distant, and I decided to be honest. Not cruel, just honest. I told her that I had needed space to think about the dynamics of our friendship. I told her that I had realized I didn't feel respected or valued in the group. I told her about the birthday cake, about how it had crystallized years of feeling like the butt of every joke. I spoke calmly, without accusation, just stating my experience and my truth. And then I waited. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, so long that I thought the call might have dropped. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She said she was sorry. Not a defensive sorry, not a sorry you feel that way sorry, but an actual acknowledgement that she had hurt me and that it had been wrong. She said she had been thinking about it, especially after I started pulling away, and she realized that she had been using me as an easy target, that she had been projecting her own insecurities onto me, that the jokes had crossed a line from playful to cruel, and she hadn't been willing to see it until I removed myself from the equation. She said the group wasn't the same without me, that they had noticed how much of their bonding had been based on putting me down, and that seeing it clearly had made her uncomfortable. I appreciated her apology, I really did, but I also knew that an apology didn't erase years of damage. It didn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep. It didn't restore the confidence they had chipped away at piece by piece. It was a start, but it wasn't a solution. I told her that I needed more time, that I wasn't ready to jump back into things, that I had built a life in my absence that I actually really loved, and that any friendship moving forward would need to be radically different from what we had before. She said she understood, that she would respect my boundaries, that the door was open whenever I was ready. But here's what I had learned in those months of absence. I didn't need that door to be open. I didn't need their approval or their apology to validate my decision. I had already validated myself by choosing to leave. The apology was nice, and maybe someday Jessica and I would rebuild some kind of friendship on healthier terms. But it wasn't the resolution I had been seeking because I had already found resolution within myself. I had already learned that my worth isn't determined by whether people treat me well. It's inherent and unchangeable, and mine to protect. I had already discovered that declining invitations without explanation wasn't rude or dramatic or selfish. It was an act of self-love so profound that it changed the entire trajectory of my life. As time went on, I maintained my boundaries with the old group. I would occasionally respond to messages in the group chat if it was something I genuinely wanted to engage with, but I never felt obligated to perform or participate just to maintain appearances. I declined most invitations, accepted one or two when I felt genuinely comfortable, and when I knew I could leave if things felt off. And you know what? The world didn't end. The friendships I thought I couldn't live without turned out to be friendships I thrived without. The loneliness I feared never materialized because I had filled my life with quality over quantity, with people who actually added value instead of extracting it. My life became quieter, but infinitely richer. My weekends were no longer filled with obligatory social events that left me drained. My phone was no longer a source of anxiety every time it buzzed. My sense of self was no longer dependent on whether I successfully navigated the minefield of someone else's humor. I started pursuing goals I had put off, went back to school for a certificate in environmental policy, got a promotion at work that I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to go for in my old state of mind. I traveled solo for the first time, spent a week in Colorado hiking and reading and sitting with my own thoughts, and discovered that I actually really enjoyed my own company when I wasn't constantly hearing their voices in my head telling me I wasn't good enough. The transformation wasn't just external, it was deeply internal. I started recognizing patterns I had tolerated in other areas of my life. A coworker who always volunteered me for extra tasks without asking. A family member who used guilt as a manipulation tool. A dating pattern where I accepted less than I deserved because at least it was attention. Having set boundaries with my friend group, I suddenly saw where else I needed them. And I started implementing them, one at a time, each one getting easier. Each one reinforcing the fundamental truth that I had the right to protect my peace, that I was allowed to say no, that I didn't owe anyone access to me just because they wanted it or expected it. Some people from the old group tried harder than others to maintain contact. Amanda and I eventually had coffee, just the two of us, and had an honest conversation about her passivity during all those years. She apologized for not speaking up, admitted she had been afraid of becoming the next target if she defended me. I appreciated her honesty, and we've maintained a casual friendship with clear boundaries, seeing each other occasionally but not enmeshed in that old toxic dynamic. Tyler never apologized, and I never expected him to. We simply drifted apart, which was fine by me. Marcus followed Jessica's lead in apologizing, but it felt performative, like he was saying what he thought he should say rather than what he actually felt. Jessica and I have grabbed coffee a handful of times, and there's potential there for something healthier, but I'm in no rush. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for a relationship is let it breathe. Let it be small and simple. Let it earn its way back into your life through consistent changed behavior rather than grand promises. Looking back now, I can see that the decision to start declining invitations without explanation was never really about them. It was about me finally deciding that I mattered. It was about recognizing that the discomfort of setting boundaries was temporary, but the damage of not setting them was permanent. It was about understanding that real connection requires respect, and respect requires that both people value each other's humanity equally. It was about learning that you can't hate yourself into becoming someone others will love, that you have to love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't. If you're reading this or watching this or listening to this and something in my story resonates with you, if you have people in your life who make you feel small, who use your vulnerabilities as comedy material, who leave you feeling exhausted and diminished after every interaction, I want you to know something. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to decline invitations without explanation. You don't owe anyone your continued presence in situations that harm you, no matter how long you've known them, no matter what history you share, no matter how lonely you fear you might be. The loneliness of being alone is temporary and healable. The loneliness of being with people who don't truly see you or value you is soul-crushing and permanent. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to realize that friendships that once served you no longer do. You are allowed to change your mind about who gets access to your time and energy and heart. You are allowed to build a life that feels peaceful instead of performing in a life that looks good from the outside, but destroys you from the inside. You are allowed to choose yourself, even when choosing yourself means disappointing people who have grown comfortable with you putting yourself last. The greatest gift I ever gave myself was the gift of my own absence from spaces that didn't honor my presence. The greatest act of self-love I ever performed was the simple act of saying no and meaning it, of protecting my peace like it was the most precious thing I owned. Because it is. Your peace is precious. Your well-being matters. Your boundaries are valid. And you don't need anyone's permission or understanding to implement them. So if you found yourself in a similar situation, if you're tired of being the punchline, if you're exhausted from performing and pretending and shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold the fullness of who you are, I encourage you to start practicing the most radical act of self-care there is. Start declining. Start protecting your energy. Start choosing yourself. Not with anger or bitterness or revenge, but with the calm certainty that you deserve better and that you're willing to believe that even when you're scared, even when you're alone, even when you're not sure what comes next. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away from people you thought you couldn't live without? Have you ever set a boundary that terrified you but ultimately saved you? I would love to hear your story in the comments below because your experience matters and your voice deserves to be heard. Understanding that we're not alone in these struggles, that other people have faced similar challenges and come out stronger on the other side, that's incredibly powerful and healing. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your wisdom. Let's create a community here where we support each other in choosing peace over performance, where we celebrate boundaries instead of criticizing them, where we remind each other that we're worthy of respect and love and kindness, especially from the people we call friends. If this story touched your heart, if it resonated with something you're experiencing or have experienced, if it gave you permission to consider making changes in your own life, please leave a like on this video. It helps this message reach more people who might need to hear it, who might be sitting in their car crying after another gathering where they were the punchline, who might be wondering if they're overreacting or being too sensitive, who need to know that they're not crazy and they're not alone and they deserve so much better. Your like could be the thing that helps this video find the person who desperately needs its message today. And if you want to hear more stories like this, more real talk about navigating difficult relationships and choosing yourself and building a life that actually feels good to live, please subscribe to Living Through It. This channel is dedicated to sharing authentic stories about real human experiences, the messy, complicated, beautiful, difficult parts of life that we all navigate but don't always talk about. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Who knows, the next video might be exactly what you need to hear at exactly the right moment. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring, for taking the time to engage with my story. Remember that you matter, that your feelings are valid, that you're allowed to protect yourself, and that choosing your peace over other people's comfort isn't selfish, it's survival. Take care of yourself out there, set those boundaries, decline those invitations, and build a life that honors who you actually are instead of who people expect you to be. You deserve nothing less.